The British Parliament received word of the capture of Cornwallis and their largest army in North America in late 1781, but it was only the beginning of the bad news. Over the next several months of winter, they learned of losses in the Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, and in the oceans. Parliament decided in 1782 that no further aggressions would be conducted against America, allowing it to concentrate its forces against France and Spain. Lord North, who had been Prime Minister, was forced to step down. Although America was ready for peace at this time, and so was Britain, the situation with their alliances required that America wait. After all, they could only go and entreat with Britain if France agreed. But France was also allied with Spain, and Spain insisted that they capture Gibraltar first. So, because Spain would not make peace, France could not make peace, and therefore the U.S. could not make peace either. So what ended up happening in the United States was about 18 months of General Clinton staying in New York City and Washington staying outside New York City. There was very little activity on either part of either government or on the parts of those armies. However, on September 3rd, 1783, the Peace of Paris was finally signed. The war had lasted about 8.5 years since Lexington and Concord. America was, I would say, most likely the largest winner of that peace accord. It gained its independence. It was recognized by Britain and the French and the Dutch, and eventually the Spanish as well. But also, America gained all the land from the east coast of America to the Mississippi, with the exception of Florida and Louisiana and British-held Canada. So it was a much larger swath of land than they had hoped. Ben Franklin was a large part of the architect of that peace accord. Britain retained control of Canada at that time and also received many of its Caribbean colonies back from France and Spain. They also were able to maintain some of their colonies in India and also some of their African colonies as well. France retained many of its islands in the Caribbean, but found itself deeply, deeply in debt. That debt would not be paid, and in the next 15 years, France would endure its own revolution. Spain was allowed to keep Minorca, but never did capture Gibraltar. It also got to keep Florida and Louisiana and all lands west of the Mississippi. Holland received some of its Caribbean holdings and was no longer seen as a world power. The biggest loser at the Peace of Paris was certainly the Native Americans. Those who had lived between the Mississippi River and the Appalachian Mountains, who for the last 15 years had been promised that that was their land, now found America in ownership of that land. They were not invited to the peace table at all. It is estimated by historians that as many as 50% of the natives had perished by the end of the American Revolution. Not only were they not present at the bargaining table, they were considered and then dismissed. Several of the diplomats had raised the issue of natives owning that land, but it was soon realized that the Native Americans had become so powerless and so unable to defend themselves that they were no longer considered in any kind of peace negotiation. So the U.S. took possession of their land, setting off another frontier series of skirmishes and also the beginning of land speculation. Those skirmishes would endure in America for over a century. Now, whenever we started this lesson series, I argued it in a very early lesson that America won the revolution, but that it can also be said Britain won the revolution as well. That's kind of an unusual thing to say. But by now, I think perhaps you're beginning to see how this can be the case. Yes, America won. Yes, America gained independence, and it gained an enormous amount of land. But Britain didn't do too badly, did it? It maintained control of Canada. It was able to control its Caribbean colonies. And its main enemy, France was now so economically weak that they would not recover. Over the next 30 years, Britain would regrow its navy and would start what became the Second British Empire. They would increase their holdings in Africa, in Asia, and they would colonize Australia. And an empire on which the sun never set was able to be built because of Britain's victories in the American Revolution.